Hey everyone, I'm Sharon Pearson. Welcome to this episode of Perspectives. Today we're going to be chatting with a lovely woman named Sophie Dean, and she's in Lisbon currently writing her next children's book. You may have heard of her. She created an organization called Bright Little Labs, and you can visit the website brightlittlelabs.com if you want to. And what she's done, she's created this amazing network where she's created books and stories and adventures for kids to have, where they get to solve problems and crack codes and go on adventures and discover what they're made of and be creative and adventurous and expressive. And she's done it all initially with a Kickstarter. So she did some crowdfunding, built up Bright Little Labs, and then she had more equity get injected into the business through Warner coming along and investing in it, which is pretty significant and a major achievement that you'll see in our conversation. She's very understated about. She has been selected a couple of years ago, I think it was, as one of UK's most influential women in IT. She worked with Google and the education department in England to roll out computers and computer literacy. She's been the winner of a number of awards in her space. She speaks passionately about how do we empower young girls so the message isn't, because in storytelling, you may already know this, but in children's books, a lot of the protagonists are the boys. The boys get to solve the problems. The girls get to tap into magic to solve the problems. There's these inbuilt biases that we as parents and educators maybe need to question. And I'm not saying boys are girls and girls are boys and it's all exactly the same. I appreciate we're all unique, we're all different, we express ourselves the way we want to express ourselves. I leaned towards having dolls and having bulldozers. I had horses and I played in the mud and I thought it was fantastic, but then I wanted to dress up. So isn't that, and I know it's just talking about my experience. There are so many versions of how we can express ourselves. But what this great woman has done is created a character called Agent Asha. And you're going to hear about her in our interview. And it's a wonderful journey of creation so that Agent Asha, who's this 11-year-old character, who's the protagonist, who's female, who's not the stereotypical what we maybe would expect when we open the book. And I say that with some sadness. You open a children's book, you have an expectation they're going to be white. You have an expectation probably going to be a boy hero. Around about, there's a ratio of 1 and 3 to boy heroes. Less than 4% of the characters in children's stories are something other than the stereotypical white. So we talk about norms and exceptions and how unless we expand what the definition of normal is, we're going to keep having expectations. And I always talk about the genesis of the problem. What's the genesis of the problem? Why is it we have a cultural bias in many societies to lean towards certain people to have the answers or to be the provision of the final word on something? Well, I think the genesis is in moments like this, when we give our children stories and we tell them stories where the protagonist is usually culturally male and is the go-getter, and the woman in the stories, and the research is showing this, is in the kitchen. So she breaks all that down and she does it in a really fun, informative way. She's very, very understated. But what she has done and what she's achieving is fantastic. So if you're a parent, an educator, or someone who just loves the idea of studying culture and how is it that we have the culture we have, and can we question it, and what is healthy questioning, and how can we think about it differently, I think you're going to enjoy this podcast. If you do enjoy it and you love following perspectives, make sure you hit a button that helps you subscribe, or you might want to share this story or this interview with someone. And anyway, I really trust you're getting value from it. We've picked up so many new viewers recently around the world. I'm so grateful to all of you. I think you're fantastic. I love that you enjoy it. Please keep sending the feedback in or write a review if you love it. Obviously, the more reviews you get and the more people hit subscribe or something like that, the better it does and the more people can find us and can enjoy our messages. We have got some great guests coming up following this interview. Some great people who are going to be talking about. They're just such leaders in their fields. But in the meantime, I just dig this woman. I think she's fantastic. I think you're really going to like her and her story and what it is she's wanting to achieve. So here we go. Here's Sophie Dean. Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. I'm Sharon Pearson. I'm here today with Sophie Dean. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We met through a mutual friend here in Melbourne, Australia.
Yes, although I met her when she was working in London. So
yes.
Emily, the amazing bookseller. And
yes.
She worked in my local bookshop, and I went in one day and was asking her if she had any recommendations for kids' books with diverse leads, or telling stories from different points of view. And she has the most extensive knowledge of what's going on in kids' books, and she knows all the best books with diverse leads, inclusive stories. And so we just started talking about it, and now I think it's 3 years later or something.
Well, she was very excited that we should get together as soon as I started speaking with her about what I cared about. So I'm just thrilled about this. Thank you so much. Now, you're in Lisbon currently.
Yes.
You're creating there?
Yeah, I'm writing the next book in the series, which my publisher expects on the 1st of October. And so because of lockdown, our office is remote anyway, and we can't do any of the meetings or the travel that we were meant to be doing this year. So I've come out here to have a change of scene and to try and focus on the writing.
Yeah. Now, we need to share with our viewers what you do, because it's truly fascinating. We're going to intersperse this podcast, the visual version, with a couple of the clips that I found on your website where you talk about Agent Asha and what it is that you do. So could you just share a little bit of what you're doing currently, because it's truly fascinating. And then we'll get into how it came about and why it matters. But just give us a snapshot. What is it you do?
I am the founder of a kids media startup, a small company, and we make stuff for kids like cartoons and books and apps and games and interactive experiences. And it's all about giving kids 21st century skills and showing them inspiring role models. So I run a small company half of the time. Well, I'm meant to be doing it all of the time, but I also am the creator in the company, and so I write the stories and creatively develop the ideas.
You're underselling yourself a little bit, so I'm going to pick it up a little bit. The company's Bright Little Labs, if anybody hasn't heard of it, and it's really worth visiting. And this extraordinary woman has done some study and has realized the underrepresentation of female protagonists and anybody of any diverse characteristics as protagonists or even bit parts in children's books. And one of the things that has fascinated me for a long time, probably 5 or 6 years, was the impact, Sophie, if we're raised exposed to certain gender stereotypes, what someone has as characteristic stereotypes, surely that must impact how we expect the world to be when we get older. Am I being too simplistic here? Is it as simple as that?
No, I wholeheartedly believe that is exactly what it is. And actually, storytelling is meant for that. It's meant for humans to be able to spread a message far and wide. It's easier than telling people facts. So you use stories to disseminate your values or your cultures, or to inspire people to do something. And if we're always saying to, not just kids, but actually, because adults are reading the books too, if we're always saying, if you're white, you're more visible. If you're male, then you are more powerful. Your voice is more important. If your skin color isn't white, you're less likely to achieve any sort of success. You're less likely to be the hero or the leader or the engineer of tomorrow. Then 100%, we all internalize those stories, and it shapes what we think we can become and what we think other people are going to become. And actually, it's not just about girls. Like, I think that we stereotype boys massively in stories. We tell them that to be strong, you can't have emotions, you can't show emotions, and that's just as damaging. I personally don't think it's simplistic to think that those stories are the blueprints for how we see the world when we grow up.
I've always thought that storytelling was the most powerful and profound way to go into the unconscious mind, and it's certainly what I've been taught as an adult. And we can't really underestimate the power of storytelling to children and the impact that metaphor is going to have on them. And I was having a look at a video that was parallel to the work you're doing. I won't get the stats right. We've already agreed pre-recording that none of the stats have to be completely accurate, but we'll fact check afterwards and add it into the show notes. But it was a bunch, there you go, good stat. There was a bunch of kids, 5 to 7, who were asked to draw a pilot, a surgeon, and a firefighter. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
And of all the drawings, only 5 were female.
Yeah.
And that's just stunning to me. And the 5 that were female were drawn by 5 girls. Then the teacher said, or the educator said, would you like to meet a firefighter, a surgeon, and a pilot? And I got really emotional because the door opened and they were all in full regala, their full uniform. So the pilot had the helmet. It was just fantastic. And they're all female. And the whole room, you could have heard a pin drop as all these little kids, it was like, as they assimilated what they weren't expecting, what they had expected or projected would walk through that door. And I thought at the age of 5 to 7, they're already doing that. That's ingrained. And then we become an employer. What is it we expect to sit opposite us when we do the interview? Yeah. When we become the person going for the role, what is it that we think they're going to be preferring to find? That can't not be something that we ignore. Yeah,
I think it's really bonkers, actually, like the way that we talk about everyone's so woke, equality is so important and we should have representation. But if you take a snapshot of as a global society, what media we consume and what does that say about what we really think, I think you can get right to the core of where we're at. And it's really subtle. It's stuff like in kids' movies, it's stuff like, or books, the girls will like, again, I'll send you the stats after, but girls are much, much, much more likely to have magic or sort of princess powers to get them out of a tricky situation, whereas boys will be shown to be using their problem-solving skills. And that's super subtle, but extremely powerful. Or like the animals in the cartoons are like 80%.
Let's come to the animals, but I was hoping to talk about let's talk about the animals of tick. I was hoping you'd talk about the magic because Emily mentioned this to me and I couldn't find the research on it. I find that absolutely fascinating. Girls are raised where the majority of the problems they solve are done through magical thinking, or being rescued. For boys, most of the problem solving or how they navigate the adventure is through their problem solving, their ability to think. Then we look at STEM, which is science and technology and engineering and maths and all what are considered by boys and girls the more masculine, literally that's how they describe it, the more masculine subjects. And it's only 1/3 of that industry is filled with girls. Surely, I was trying to look for research on studies. There are some studies showing this is literally how it's playing out, that what we're presenting to them and expecting of them is playing out when it goes for STEM.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, it's less than 1/3 in England. Less than 1/3 of the roles in STEM careers are taken up by women, and it's flatlined. Like it's not changed in the past. Have I frozen?
No, I'm just intrigued.
Like Sharon. It's flatlined. So, like all of the sort of initiatives that we're taking, I think, unless we see a fundamental shift in media and the stories that we tell our kids, it's still not sort of being absorbed. So
let's address something I didn't find in the reading I was doing on you, which is, I'd love to know your thoughts on this. We keep being told that it needs to be, we're all treated the same, and that, so if you go into Target now, I don't know if it's the same in the UK or where you are, it's all gender neutral clothing. It's all gender neutral everything. That wouldn't have worked for me growing up, Sophie.
What do you mean?
I wanted the Barbie so hard.
Yeah, but why did you want the Barbie? You were born into a world that told you, have the Barbie. Everyone wants you to have the Barbie. You're a good girl if you like the Barbie. You're sweet. Yeah,
all my friends had the Barbie.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure.
Then I wanted the Tonka truck And I remember discouraging myself from wanting the Tonka truck.
Because it didn't feel quite right.
I'm trying to remember. I'm going back to like the age of 6 now, but I remember the scene, and there was a cool Tonka bulldozer and a truck that you could dump everything into. And I thought that was cool, but what if I get messy? I think that was the mess up.
I love the way kids think. Well, I would say, I mean, who knows? But, and it's not, I'm making massive generalizations and everybody's different. But even that, you know, being messy and not being messy is, I think, a stereotype that's put onto kids when they're young. You know, like boys, it's okay for a boy to be messy. Oh, he's always, you know, I can't think of a boy's name. Harry's always getting into a mess and he's always playing around with the dirt, and it's sort of celebrated. It's a sign of your masculinity. And so I just think, I think it would be so interesting, because the gendered element of clothing and toys and everything when we're young is so prolific, that I think it's very hard to know if, I mean, I personally don't believe that there are natural tendencies towards one colour or the other, because also when you look geographically, in a lot of Western cultures, pink means girl and blue means boy, and we've decided that. And I think we've decided that to double our sales. You know, I think that that's a massive gimmick from the toy and retail industry that sells more stuff, because now you need one for your son and one for your daughter, etc. But when you look at other countries, pink means something else, like completely different. In, I don't want to make up a country because I can't remember, but there's an amazing but they mean different things. And so it's conditioning. No one comes out the womb and they're like, oh, intrinsically I feel pink is a feminine color. It just isn't true.
No,
I don't think.
It does. Do you believe in the big five, and that it shows that women tend to more agreeableness than boys?
I don't know what the big five is.
So there's the psychological assessment that's pretty the most prolific and most well-researched in the world is called the Big Five, where you look at CANOE, which is conscientiousness, agreeableness, level of neuroticism, I can never say that word, so emotional instability, and so on. And girls are generally, across all population types, come out as more agreeable, which means they're more likely to be caring, more likely to be nurturing, and more likely to want to take care of or make a contribution.
I don't know. Like, I think that men are taught to be less like that. And I think that naturally humans are very caring and nurturing. I don't know. I really don't know. I think quite a lot about, are there any actual differences between the genders? Do genders actually exist? Like, is it as binary as, you know, you're one thing or the other thing? And I think I probably don't think so. I probably think you could condition the whole world to flip that, and that you know, give us 300 years of this or more, and you could come out the other side. But that's just my opinion. It's just my opinion.
But the thing that I loved about what you write about, so you guys have got to get this. Bright Little Labs, this incredible woman has created a character, Agent Asha. And Agent, I want to do my best, and you can jump in and do it the way it's meant to be said. Uses codes and has adventures. And she's 11 years old, is that right, in the story? Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, please, you should. And because you're a coder, you're one of the best IT women in the country, in the UK. You've been voted one of the top 100 most influential women in IT. You should talk about what you do with Agent Asha. It's absolutely sensational.
Okay, so yeah, Agent Asha is 11 years old, and she's from a place in London called Wembley. And she's not an average kid, but she's sort of an average kid. She's got a sister, she's got parents. But the thing that's really interesting about her is that she is part of a global organization called the Children's Spy Agency. And so she spends all of her spare time sort of investigating the truth and solving missions. And because it's a global agency, there are different agents all over the world. It's a secret organization. They have their bases underneath libraries all over the world. And so Because it's the best. If you're a kid and you're a spy and you say to your parents, oh, I just want to go to the library, your parents are going to say, yeah, of course.
I love it.
And she is a coder. Asha's really good at coding. But the thing that's really defining about her is sort of her relentless search for the truth. She wants to get to the bottom of everything. And so she uses those, and it's not just coding, she uses sort of her digital skills to help her get out of problems, or help her like know what to do next as a spy. But yeah, to say the main thing about her is that she's like a top secret agent.
And she's the protagonist. She's female. From memory, is she Indian?
She's third generation British Indian heritage. So we have done like a lot of research. We have something called the Agent Asha Character Council, and it's comprised of kids, parents and grandparents from at different points who have emigrated to the UK from India, or often via Kenya. And so, and we also have made good friends with a couple of local temples, because Asha is from a Hindu family. And so she's British, she was born here and her parents were born here, but her grandparents have come to the UK from India via Kenya, one half via Kenya, the other. Anyway, and she's representing that whole sort of like, but where are you from generation.
Yeah. But I think it's simpler than that. The studies show that less than 4% of protagonists in any children's story have any colour.
Yeah.
A female. I mean, the stats just plummet when you want all the, if I want to be represented, it's tough. And if you want to be represented, it's tough. But you've done that. You've got an Indian girl protagonist who's smart in STEM, who's using go-gettedness, everything I admire about a little girl, to go for it. I mean, if she wants to be Barbie-ish and feminine, and more power to you. There's stacks of books for you if you want to be a princess. I also wanted to be a princess, by the way. I was very disappointed to the age of 10 that I couldn't feel a pea under my mattress. You're
right.
Mean,
there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a princess. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
And it's a completely relatable fantasy, isn't it? You know, it's a fantasy world where you can play out having what you want and being able to use magic, and I think it's important that young girls and young boys can imagine themselves in those fantasy worlds. I have nothing against princesses.
No.
Yeah, Asha's not. She's also she's 11. She wants to be the top bestest spy in the world. That's her current ambition.
And what she's using are parts of any person that's there if you want to tap into it. That's what I admire about her. So I was raised on very stereotypical books where there was a princess. I was actually raised on some non-stereotypical as well, Enid Blyton, where there was an equal group of girls and boys. I can't remember who was the girl and who was the boy, and they all did very similar stuff until the girls had to make the dinner, and then I had a problem. Whereas Asha's not going to stay home and make the dinner, and she's not going to do the housework. She's going to go out and solve adventures. And what's it doing to kids? What are they saying about it? How are they responding to this?
The communications we get with kids are very serious spy communications. So they write to us because we're like the safeguarders of the. So we get lots of kids writing in with a gadget design or with some intelligence that they want us to know about, and codes that they're breaking or making. And so we never get a kid who's like, I like Agent Asha because she's inspired me and I haven't seen a figure like this before. We get that from adults, but from kids we just get this full-on buy-in and massive engagement that I'm powerful too. I could discover the truth too, and I want to be part of this global group of kids.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I think we've done some survey on our kids. We've got kids in over 100 countries, and I think it's something, again, rough stats, but it's something like 30% girls, 30% boys, and 40% kids say like none of your business, or I'm a robot, or something like that. They'll skew. We give them the option to say I don't want to say. But we have got quite good sort of like gender split in what we've done, and that's been really conscious. We've been really conscious to try and make it feel inclusive, and that just because there's a girl on the front cover, if you're a boy, you feel like this is a cool adventure I also want to be part of.
Yeah. What do you think about the studies that show that little boys generally prefer to have little boy heroes, whereas little girls don't apparently care?
I mean, this was one of the most frustrating things that happened on my journey so far. So like come up with Agent Asha and started speaking to different publishers about it after we did a Kickstarter. And everyone was like, oh, so it's a book for girls. And they explained to me what you've just said, that if it has a girl on the front cover, it's a book for girls. Whereas if it's a boy, it's a book for everybody. And it just seems it seems genuinely stupid to me that, like, of course that's happening if you keep telling people that that's the case, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like if you say to writers or creators, no, this is the status quo and we're definitely going to keep it, like of course that's going to be the status quo. And so I think it's nonsense, and I think it's really stupid, and yeah, that's what I think about it.
I can tell. Well, I do get worried because if there is truth in it that boys prefer, which I think they do, boys prefer, not all of them, but a lot of boys prefer boys heroes and girls prefer either. That's telling me the stereotypical narrative has begun already, because
Boys don't have options. Like,
yeah,
boys do prefer that because that's what they've been told they should prefer.
yeah, exactly.
So
and then it becomes self-fulfilling. It's just like going into the boys' club of STEM. You go into the tech industry, the stories you hear in Silicon Valley about how it's a giant boys' club, and that if a woman joins it, she feels, this is massive generalizations. I'm sweeping in the generalizations right now. But there are a lot of stories of women feeling it's just not worth it to be a part of that type of club. But how did it get there? If you go back all the way to the genesis, it's stories like this. It's stories where the little kids grow up with certain expectations about who has what role and who's comfortable in what role and who can expect who to be in what role. And if those expectations aren't met, there's cognitive dissonance, and it's playing out what we're seeing in Silicon Valley. Not to wipe off the whole of Silicon Valley, there's plenty of awesome people there. But for the stories we hear about it.
That's, I mean, I totally agree with that. And that's why I also think it's as important that young boys read our stories as young girls, because we want young boys to think it's completely normal to have a female heroine or a girl who's powerful that you would want to be mates with, that you want to go on those adventures with, but you don't feel that it's a problem that she's leading the adventures. That you understand that that's a possibility, that, you know, like that you learn that respect very early on. And it is, you know, Silicon Valley, and as an entrepreneur also, the industries are very male dominated, and it can be difficult. And I'm a white woman. Well, I mean, it's complicated, but like, I mean, I'm white. So I think if you are from an unrepresented group, if you're a woman of color, like, although again, I don't really like that expression because we're all color. So it makes it seem like the default color is white, which is nonsense too, but whatever, like, however, whichever term I use for it, it's super tough in these industries to break through when you're excluded. And I think you're right that it starts really early on.
Well, when you're not the default position, you're immediately placed in the position of other. So it's either the norm or the exception. And the moment you're in the category of exception, there's a presupposition there. You've got to somehow prove you can fit in with the norm instead of expanding what norm should be. That's how I interpret what I'm seeing here with the work you're doing. It's you're attempting to, I think, putting words in your mouth, so please, go for it, but make the exceptions not the exceptions anymore, and change how we create stories around that, so the protagonist can be whoever we decide it is, rather than, oh, the protagonist is a girl, is it? With surprise in my voice. It's, oh, Ash is a great protagonist and nothing else needs to be said. That's what I'm sensing in your work.
Exactly. It's really important that the story is really engaging, and that is why we want kids to go for it, for no other reason than it sounds like a really cool spy agency and they want to be part of it.
I love it. I would have loved to have been part of it. I just think it's fantastic.
I love it too, but we're both too old to be in it.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate the cutoff. Now, Can you tell us a little bit about what's it been like creating it? What have you had experiences around this, around expectations about how you should be? Or how the story should unfold? Or yeah, please. What's been your experience in creating her and this whole movement that you're creating?
It's had so many positives and so many negatives, but I'd say overall it's been a positive experience. I'm not from my background isn't in the creative industry, so the learning curve is constantly steep for me. But the wonderful things has been working with a community of people who want to create her, working with people with lived experience of her character, and the kids and the grandparents, and I've had like teas and dinners and had my cheeks squeezed and just had like the most amazing experience creating her. And we have input from like really cool technical people who are working on IBM Watson, people who are really interested in artificial intelligence, internet experts. So we have like an amazing group of people come together to think about the story telling and the story making, and that's been great. It's been great to see how actual kids and parents and teachers are like, yes, we want this, we love it, it's great, like how can we support you? It's been very grassroots. The thing that I found really difficult is in a very general way, the media industry and the publishing industry just feels sometimes like it's a really hard world to break into. Everything, it seems to feel very like networked. It depends on who you know and what you've done before, and it doesn't feel easy to get into it as an outsider. And so that's been at times tough. And people always want to play it safe, like make it a bit safer. Just give her a younger brother, that would be safer. Then we'll definitely be appealing to boys and girls, and like those sorts of quite strong suggestions that have come up along the way that have been quite hard for me as a tiny company trying to.
Yeah. Did you feel tempted to go the pathway you were getting just for the sake of getting the break? I would have got to the edge and thought I need a glass of red wine and.
It's really weird. I didn't at the time. I never felt tempted at the time, but I felt extreme regret after.
Yeah.
And so at the time I would always be like, no, like it just felt like with all of me, like, no, like that's not the point. But then afterwards I'd go home if once I'd said no, and feel like, was that the wrong thing to do? I've got such a big opportunity and I want to move with everyone. I want to just change things a little bit in the mainstream. I don't want to have something so radical that it becomes so niche that only a few people see it. And so I'm really conscious to keep it mainstream. And then have I ruined everything? Have I ruined my chances? And am I being responsible? So I have a lot of regret and self-doubt afterwards. But interestingly, when the moments come up, there's no question in my mind.
No, your vision's so clear to you. It's fantastic. But afterwards, I get that fear, the feeling, have I just niched myself? There's going to be 6 mums who are on my creative committee and their friends are going to be in, have I made it too narrow? But it hasn't worked out that way. Now, you've got a really interesting story. If you don't mind me talking about it, you did a crowdfunder for this.
Yeah, of course. We started it on Kickstarter, and I don't know, it's when I look back, it looks like there was a plan, but there was not a plan really. The big goal has always been cartoons. Sesame Street is a huge inspiration to me. Sesame Street came around in the civil riots in America, and some people wanted to do something to reach the poor African-American kids in the country and help them with literacy and numeracy. And so out of that sort of desire to make education accessible across the country, Sesame Street happened. Sesame Street penetrated 98% of households in America, and for $5 a head, it got kids to the same level of numeracy and literacy as $7,000 a head preschool education.
Wow.
So it showed this massive power of mainstream media to reach everybody, and they were amazing. They showed people living in tenement blocks, they showed poor people, they showed people with different abilities, they showed people of different ethnicities. And so I was always thinking, TV, I think, is this powerful medium, like how can we get to TV? But obviously, sat in my in my tiny world, not like in my small world in London. And so I was like, well, maybe if I make a book first, because a book's going to be way cheaper than a cartoon and much more, I could just try it. And so that's why we did the Kickstarter first. But the Kickstarter was meant as a means to sort of test the waters. Do kids like this concept? And then it went really well. And it was a massive group and community effort for the Kickstarter to work. And then once it had got into the market, it started winning different awards for like the best coding book. And we won quite a few awards, which was great. And then we signed a deal with a publisher, and then we got investment. We started speaking to the big media companies about investing in our company, and ultimately took investment from, they're now Warner Media, Warner Brothers, but at the time it was Turner. So that was amazing. It was like a total dream come true. Thanks.
What was that day like, or what was that like? Can you talk about what that was? Because so Warner, for just go into it, Warner is responsible for CNN and some of the biggest brands there are in the world, in media, in legacy media. So what was it like getting that deal? That's incredible.
Well, because I don't know if you guys have Cartoon Network, do you?
Yeah. Well, we have Foxtel and other things like that, so we can get all those types. Yeah, we pretty well can get any of it. Yeah.
What was it like doing the deal? I mean, it was like, it was horrible. I hated it. I was constantly worried, and you have to go, we went into, probably it was 6 months from the beginning to the signed contract, and I worried all the time. And it was only really maybe a month after that had finished that I was like, I'm so excited and grateful. And but at the time I just felt like, I was just worried I was going to do the wrong thing, all the time.
It was going to fall over any second.
Well, not even fall over, that I was going to do the wrong thing, and that I was going to ruin this.
What would that be? What does that mean? You do the wrong thing. What are you envisioning?
The contracts were really, they required a lot of negotiation. What if I was worrying about the wrong point in the contracts? And until something's signed, I always have that feeling that maybe it's going to disappear for no reason. It was tough. I've never done a negotiation like that before, and obviously I had so much help. I wasn't sat there on my own. We had lawyers and advisors, but I don't thrive in that sort of. I'm not like deals. I was like,
that's a massive deal. Now they're planning to turn this into a cartoon, into animation.
Well, we're planning to turn it into a cartoon. So
My apologies.
Pardon?
My apologies. You're quite right.
Oh, no. It's such a nuanced detail, but they're an equity investor in our company, and one of the things that we haven't really spoken about is how we as a company use technology to create a sort of a better world for kids, and how we have this direct relationship with the kids, and they write to us and they play on our websites, and we get to learn about them directly. Whereas in traditional media companies, when you've got a television, it's much more of a passive relationship. You don't really know how your kids are dealing with you. And so one of the reasons that we're an interesting kids media company is because we have that direct relationship, and that data, those insights can inform our content, that we can make better content for kids. And so the investment was around the strength of the IP and the stories, but it was also about the sort of trying to innovate the approach in kids media and create games and interactive experiences.
I can see this being a game for sure.
Yeah, it is a game.
Yeah, it already is, of course.
Once you finish the book, or to various points throughout the book, there's sort of Easter eggs hidden, but you're basically guided to sign up and download the app, and the app's free, and then your spy experience can go even further. And it's also a subscription pack. So in the UK, we've just started selling, you get monthly missions and training in the post, which are all paper based. It's all offline. Amazing. We don't think that kids spend all day in front of their screens. But we're working with Warner to turn it into a big cartoon, but they're equity investors rather than co-production partners, which might be a bit too nuanced. I might be going into
no, it's not. It means that it's on you to get into a studio and actually storyboard this all out yourselves. That's all of the work's on you. It's
yeah.
massive difference.
We do have a very good relationship with Warner, so
yeah. Now, can we go back a little bit? You did some pretty amazing work before this. You were a lawyer and walked away from that. And you look like you're 27, so I'm having trouble working out the years right now.
No, I'm not. I'm 37.
Well, you've done so much. So you were a lawyer, but then you went and worked with with Google, and who was the other partner? And you introduced. Please tell that story. It's pretty incredible what you did before this.
Okay, so I was very, very briefly a lawyer because I came from basically a family where my parents hadn't gone to uni, so they were like, be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant.
Yeah.
But then it wasn't for me, so I left and I had a career in tech, and then in 2014, I think just 1 year before Australia, we introduced computing into our primary school curriculum. And I worked with a charity and then partnered up with Google and the Department for Education to help teach teachers about that curriculum and get everybody sort of up to speed with this curriculum, because at the time it was brand new and teachers are already doing the most difficult job, and they have a lot of pressure on them.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, they're required to teach computing. It probably isn't something they learn at school themselves, or computer science. And actually, so much of computer science is already being taught at school. It's sort of like logic and instruction giving and sequencing and problem solving. But my role was to try and sort of help to introduce that into our schools in the UK. And that was what I did directly before setting up Brightness Labs, because what I'd noticed is there was this homeschool divide. So whatever was going on in schools, the stereotypes around tech is still massive. And so, kids might come home and parents felt completely alienated. Like, I can't even, I hate my printer. There's no way I can help you with your computer science homework. Computer science is for maths geeks, like that.
Yeah.
And then you find that what was on offer to help families tended to be like quite niche, like maker sets, and they were quite technical, or a book saying teach your children to code, which in 2015 no parents wanted to buy that. They'd be like, they teach my children how to count or read or whatever. And so I felt that was exacerbating a divide, a social divide and a digital divide, and that it would be great if we could tackle that with something mainstream and inclusive, like a story or a cartoon. No one's intimidated by like a good adventure story. So that's the path, sort of.
What you're doing fits into a bigger narrative, which is attempting to change. Well, I always care about problems in terms of, and solutions in terms of genesis. We're not going to solve, I don't believe, having adult people suddenly train in STEM. We're not going to move women who are choosing to go to university. It's too late. I think it's almost too late then. Go and study STEM, because the maths is showing only 1/3 of females are going into STEM, and we need to get the numbers to 50%. That to me strikes me as completely absurd and naive. That message wouldn't even touch the sides of me. It's too late. I'm cooked. I'm not doing STEM. So I always think in terms of genesis. If you go all the way back to the cause, what is it? What you're doing, creating, fits into a bigger narrative. What is it we need to be thinking about before we get to university and before we realize we haven't gone to Silicon Valley because we're female or whatever else? There's this. What else is it we should be thinking about?
Such an interesting question, because actually, like, it's not particularly a passion for technology. It's a passion for creating stuff. And technology is the current tool that we can use to create stuff. And I think everybody should feel empowered to have a say in the world that we live in, and to be able to create that world. And we need everybody to create that world. We need everybody to do that. And so for me, the genesis is twofold. It's one, like, question the system. Do we like the systems that we're living in? As a kid, if you're thinking about the future, I think creating comes out of being able to sort of look around you and think, do you like it? Do you want to create more of this? Do you want to create more of that? And then feeling empowered, like that's your place and you're able to, you have the skills to, and the ability to think for yourself, to know that you can create and to think about what you want to create. And then once you get there, technology is a tool that's going to help you create things and help open up doors for you. It's going to open up career opportunities across all industries. All industries are being like disrupted by technology. So you don't need to be a coder. You can work in anything that you're passionate about, and digital skills will help you, just like literacy helps you.
Do you think it should be standard in school when they first go to school?
Yeah, I think over the next 5 to 10 years, it will become like a basic literacy, like reading and writing.
Fabulous. Oh, that's amazing. So tell me more. What else are you thinking about in that space?
What, in the Genesis?
Yeah, we talk about the Genesis. So one of the things, I was kind of joking when I said it before, but I did mean it. I was discouraged from being messy. And then I wasn't. We broke through that. We moved to a farm and that was the only way I rolled. It was just messy. But I do think there is something to, I think there's research showing, God, I can't believe there's research on this, but girls are encouraged by parents to look pretty and neat and not get dirt on their skirts. And boys are encouraged to be robust and go out and play. That right there to me is a Genesis moment, to think about what are we imposing upon the child. Now, maybe they want to stay pretty and maybe they want to, maybe there is a Genesis moment there, Sophie. Maybe there is something to that little moment when the girl said, don't mess up your dress. Don't get dirt on your skirt. Oh my God, what have you done to your dress? And we laugh at the boy covered in mud. Isn't that a Genesis moment right there, where we've had a predictable response that is determining their next decision?
I think so. I mean, even that small example, I think nowadays, like, men have more time than women. If you follow the rules of society, we have less time because we're meant to look different and we're meant to spend hours and so much money making ourselves what we naturally were. And men just allowed to just like be like they are and just walk out. I'm not saying that men don't ruin themselves, and again, I'm being really general, but even that small thing of being told that it's unfeminine to be messy or dirty and being told that it's masculine to be messy and dirty, I think it genuinely has like implications when you grow up about the amount of time that you have to dedicate yourself to solving big problems that are important to you or that you're passionate about, because you have to look a particular way to be acceptable, blah, 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 blah.
Well, you also have to do the housework. I read a study out of the UK showing that it hasn't changed in years. I haven't read studies in Australia, but in the UK, it's abysmal. It's literally women are doing 5 hours more. I couldn't remember the time frame, but I read it thinking that's not even possible. And men have not increased their hours at all. Again, it's a generalization because this was obviously a study averaging out the hours of contribution towards the housework when both people in the household were working. There are individuals there where it's not like that at all. There's a genuine partnership. But for many, it is very stereotypical. What's the genesis of that? And I keep coming back to when we're younger, what we see our parents do. So a lot of the stories show, if you see a mother, she's calling you in for dinner and telling you it's time to eat, which means she's been in the kitchen. If the man's there, he's there as a pal, he's there supportive, and he's one of the guys. These are stereotypical. Okay, so when I get called for dinner, it means my mum will be in the kitchen. When the father figure's there, he's going to help me with the problem. Right there, that's determining, I think, that decision I make at university. It's not the whole decision. I'm not that naive and I'm not oversimplifying it, but it has to be, even if it's 2% of a factor contributing to me not going into STEM. Other than the fact I'm crap at it, that there are other factors.
No, you're right. And actually, sometimes I used to do this for when I was giving talks or presentations. If you've got like 5 minutes and you're bored or you want to procrastinate, if you go onto Google and you type in cartoon, and then any of those roles you just mentioned, cartoon chef, cartoon business person, cartoon secretary, cartoon doctor, cartoon nurse, the internet will show you what gender and colour it thinks those roles are, and like what our internet is awash with and what images we're told about when we're young.
Yeah, so to me, it also comes down to teachers as well. There is research showing teachers have biases around what the girls will do and what the boys will do. And there's these expectations built into it. And as much as we try and overcome these unconscious biases, it's almost self-fulfilling. Sophie, are you with me how it's self-fulfilling? Because by the time we're in adulthood, we're kind of locked and loaded. Then we go into schools, and now these kids, we're trying to break out of these patterns with Agent Asha, who's just simply delightful. And we have teachers reinforcing the message again. So what can we do from an educational perspective so the big people can think about it differently?
I mean, I love teachers.
Yeah, of course.
I know everyone loves teachers, but I'm like, what could you do about, I mean,
This
again,
isn't me hating on teachers. This is me saying, if
no.
we don't all own it, we ain't going to change it.
No, I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that at all. But I don't know. I personally think that education systems are all a bit funny. Like, I'm not sure we're teaching kids what they need to know to cope with the future. Like, I think that it's still very knowledge-based, and the subjects probably don't serve the future we're about to go into. And probably have quite radical views on education. Like, I think we really need to be teaching kids collaboration, communication, creativity, emotional resilience, survival skills. And so,
how do you teach survival skills in your world? I'm really curious, because I'm doing a Master of Pos Psych, and obviously masses of it's focused on education. I'd love, what are your views on teaching emotional resiliency?
Teaching emotional resilience is hard. And again, I think stories of emotional resilience are good, both fictional and non-fictional stories, looking at inspiring characters and their real journey, like a lot of famous people that kids are exposed to, even historical ones like, I don't know, Abraham Lincoln or whoever. They have the backstories of depression and failure, for example. I'm thinking of Abraham Lincoln or whatever. So I think showing kids the sort of more naked truth behind what is the difference between success and failure. It's just a series of failures, but you just keep going, and actually tenacity is, and that resilience is what I think differs people into sort of succeeding or not. But I can't give you a quick answer to, like you would put in the curriculum to teach emotional resilience, but I can tell you.
I don't think you can curriculum emotional resilience. I think it's not, I really don't think so. And that's what I'm being taught in my masters, that you can teach it. It's not something you can tell a child. You can't tell a child emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is, I'm tested, I'm pushed, I learn how to handle it, I'm a bit stronger next time, and I manage. It's through our experiences, surely.
Yes, but it's the practice of reflecting on. So I'm going to give you an example of my friend Louise, who is a teacher. And she has some kids in her class who have lower emotional resilience. So they can get triggered, and then they're extremely disruptive, whatever. And so she's developed for them these boxes, and in the box there might be 5 objects, and it might be something tactile that they like to touch. It might be a couple of affirmations. It might be some coloring pencils because they like to draw. They're all bespoke to the kids, and the kids help to create it. But she maintains a practice of when they lose their temper, and I don't mean that aggressively, just literally they're unable to control their emotions. She takes them through this process, sit down with this box, take a deep breath, like really simple things like deep breathing, affirmations, meditation, reflection.
Regulation.
Yes, and then if you practice that, and if that's part of your classroom routines, then over time you learn, actually, when I lose my temper,
that's real. It beats the heck out of just telling someone about emotional resilience. They're living it. It's got to be an actual experience of resilience. You've got to experience it. You can't know resilience conceptually. So
yes, I totally agree with that, but I do think that you can provide opportunities to discover it in a learning environment.
I love it. That's a great idea. I think combined with the storytelling, 0 to hero stories, with unexpected twists and turns. How did they handle that? I love that. Then with teaching emotional regulation. Florida University in 2011, I'm just going to read from here. They studied 6,000 picture books published between 1900 and 2000, and only 7.5% of them depict female animal protagonists.
Yeah.
Would you like to speak about that? I think you mentioned it earlier, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
To me, that's like, that's the problem sort of like fully explained, that it's so subtle. That is so subtle. It's really probably not something you'd ever think about or notice, like the gendering of animals and also inanimate objects, you know, like if a cupboard has a personality or whatever. But I think that that's just a subliminal whisper in our ear saying men's voices should be listened to more. Men should be speaking more. Men are more important. Men's opinions more valuable. And it's those sorts of nuanced part of how the values that are contained in our stories that I think we really need to watch out for and really need to be conscious of and really need to change, offer something a bit different, which is what I'm not trying to say everything's awful, because it's a bit too simplistic to do that too. There's lots of reasons why things are the way that they are, and it's more like, what do we want now and how can we work to offer that so that there is an alternative.
Well, I think it's a glaring alternative. You have only 28% of women going into STEM, and there's literally no difference in intelligence. That's a glaring alternative exists. I think what you're doing is so important. 28% go into STEM. That's appalling.
It's really bad. It's also
because also a lovely understatement.
STEM is such a big part of our society. It's like our medicine, it's our technology, it's our engineering, it's the world that we live in. And the same when I look at, again, I don't have the stats to hand, but sort of who's running businesses, who runs big businesses, it's predominantly men. Who creates businesses, who runs the big one, who's on the board, who gets to go high up. And so I think we need to change it. And for me, a good place to start is changing the values and the stories early on, so that kids can see that it could be different, and identify themselves and other people in that change.
This to me is coming back to the genesis. The fact that we have CEOs that are predominantly men, that ship sailed. We're looking at history being represented there, because all the decisions that led up to that have already been and gone. They didn't suddenly arrive today. That happened 50 years ago, 40 years ago. So what is it going to look like in 40 or 50 years' time? That's what we can start shifting, and what you're doing now with the work you're doing, because you're allowing and encouraging girls to ask different questions and to consider different futures for themselves. That's so important.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Are you enjoying yourself?
Yeah, I am now, yeah. Especially now, I'm sort of, my mind is fully in the next book, and the next book is all about misinformation. And sort of there's a global vote, and no one knows what the truth is. Everyone's being swamped with fake news, and so I'm really enjoying writing that. I don't know if you saw The Social Dilemma on Netflix.
No, I haven't.
It just came out a couple of days ago, and it's mind blowing. I really recommend it. But yeah, so I'm happy. I am enjoying it, and I hope I don't muck up.
I'm seeing the theme, and you're so talented at it, and you're the one who's doing this. You're making such a difference and an impact for kids all around the world. How can people get in touch with you, Sophie, or get more of what it is you're doing, or connect their kids to Agent Asha and become part of the Central Children's Spy Agency?
It used to be called the Children's Intelligence Agency, but we had to get rid of it.
I saw that. I originally had it written as CIA in my book, and then I saw the update.
Well, I think you can buy, in Australia, you can buy Agent Asha in the shops.
Yeah.
You can download the app. If you want to talk to me, if anybody wants to talk to me, they can email me on sophie@brightlittlelabs.com. You can follow me or Bright Little Labs on social media, although to be honest, we don't really post that much. But I'd say
I'd recommend going to your website where you do a video on Agent Asha that's fantastic, and it talks through everybody how they can get involved with the adventures. What's the website?
It's www.brightlittlelabs.com. Bright like a star, little like a small thing, and labs like laboratories.
Is there anything else you'd want to share that you're thinking about?
No, it's been a really enjoyable chat, and I really appreciate you having me.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate you. I love the work you're doing.